Well, hello, I'm Neil Gregg, and I'm here today to talk about integrated water resources management. This is an international initiative which has been created over the last few decades to deal with all these urgent water issues that are out there. You see on the left from the headwaters to the right where the water is delivered to someone for critical use, and this is becoming such an urgent issue around the world that a lot of people are mobilized to see what we can do about it. And in this course we've been talking about the urgency of water issues, and we don't need to reiterate that again. But this is a quote from the Global Water Partnership, and I'll explain who that is in a few minutes. But what they say is that everybody knows that water is essential to the life of the planet and the prosperity of the people. But what fewer people know, and what political leaders fail to address, is that these increasing pressures of climate change, population growth, urbanization, and energy are putting unprecedented pressure on freshwater resources, and we've got to do something about it now. And that's what we'll be talking about today. So we've sort of characterized the water issues this way. On the left you see a list of health, environment, economy, and other categories where water is essential and it's used. And on the right you can see how the way water is used translates into impacts on these larger societal issues such as justice, economic opportunity, sustainability, and those topics. So it all comes together in this water, society, and environment nexus, which is under pressure from climate change and population growth and all those other categories of driving forces. And this creates the problem of the web of life and water, which we're trying to address. So going back to after World War II, there's been a tremendous international response to try to figure out what to do. So while I say there's been a tremendous international response, the problem is so large that it's going to take more than these international conferences and United Nations actions to deal with it. But this shows at least what people are doing and trying to create as actions. And if you go back to right after World War II, you've got these United Nations conferences. There were a group of them: environment, population, food, women, human settlements, and water, at Mar del Plata, Argentina, 1977. That sort of set the stage for the action which we're seeing today. We went through the 1980s. That was designated as the International Water Supply and Sanitation Decade. And then in the 1990s, a group of actions and conferences, frameworks for action, were developed, culminating in the 6th World Water Forum, which was held in Marseille, France, 2012. Now, along the way, there was a lot of emphasis on sustainability, and you see the report called Our Common Future, which is called the Brundtland Commission Report, 1987. That defines what is meant by sustainability. That is, preserving the options for the future so that resources will still be there for them. So there have been many actions, and here you see a web shot of the World Water Council, which was created in the 1990s to deal with the water issues. It sort of emerged out of those conferences. And you see some of the things that they're talking about, and you see Professor Ben Braga there, who is the current president of the World Water Council, giving a talk at the United Nations about water risks. And this shows what a small world it is among the water professionals that we're dealing with, because Ben Braga, as a professor at the University of São Paulo, has collaborated with us extensively here at Colorado State University, and even spent his sabbatical leave with us a few years ago using my office while I was department head at the university. So we're in constant touch with leaders like this who are talking on the global stage about these urgent water issues. So what they basically said is that we need to focus on water security. Everyone acknowledges that sustainable development is not going to be achieved without a water secure world. And this water secure world will integrate a concern for the intrinsic value of water, such as for society and environment, and all of these spiritual type values of water, with a concern for its use for survival and well-being, that is, some economic and social purposes. So this comes out of the global strategy of a group called the Global Water Partnership, which is another group somewhat related to the World Water Council, but a separate entity based out of Sweden. And I'm going to explain some of their outcomes and work in a minute here. Now, out of this 6th World Water Forum, which was 2012 in Marseille, France, a framework for action was developed with several strategies. And you'll see in these strategies the key words that we've been talking about all through the course. I won't go over them in detail, but it starts out by discussing everyone's well-being, and then different measures such as access to water and sanitation, hygiene, taking care of risks and crises, and cooperating and having peace through water. And then there's the economic development objective, and it has food, water and energy, green growth, ecosystem services. And I've highlighted in red the integrated water resources management, which is the tool that I'm talking about today, and we'll explain how it works. So strategy 3 was keeping the planet blue, quality of water and ecosystems, reducing pressure, dealing with climate change and urbanization. And then strategy 4 is putting into place the conditions for success: good governance, which is missing all over, financing, and capacity building through enabling environments. So integrated water resources management is really a paradigm, a way of looking at water resources management that would bring into harmony all these different processes that we've been talking about during this course. What you see there is the definition that's been developed by the Global Water Partnership, where they define it as a process to promote the coordinated development and management of water, land, and related resources in order to maximize the economic and social welfare in an equitable manner without compromising the sustainability of vital ecosystems and the environment. Now, like a lot of the things that we deal with in water, this is a very complex definition. They've tried to weave all the important words into the definition so it comes out very complex. But basically, integrated water resources management is a way to bring everything together, to balance all of our values and have it work out for sustainability for all purposes. So you see the concepts that were developed there: multiple uses, holistic management, multiple perspectives, participatory approach, and involvement of women, all important. These came out of a conference in the late 1990s in Dublin, where a group of stakeholders worked to develop those key principles. Now, in integrated water resources management, there are a lot of tools that can be brought to bear. We've discussed these throughout the course. There are things like the enabling environment that you see there, with good policies and finances and legal framework and enablements like that. And then you have identification of key institutional roles. These are very long and complex, and we don't need to focus on everything. But just think about, for example, the River Basin commissions, River Basin organizations, and watershed organizations. If you don't have those, and you don't have the management capability that you need, the framework for people to work together, things are not going to work out in the end. Here's another set of tools. This time the management instruments. You see things like assessment techniques, planning, indicators. All of these are very technical, but without them, integrated water resources management is not going to work well in the end. Here's some more: efficiency, social change instruments and methods for conflict resolution, regulatory instruments, economic instruments. All of these are critical. And in the end, without having good tools like this, integrated water resources management is not going to work. But to illustrate how this should work, we really need to focus on case studies, and I've got 2 or 3 of these to discuss in a little detail, just so we can focus on how integrated water resources management is supposed to work and actually does work in a range of different situations. So let's start with the Colorado River Basin, which is one of the case studies that we've been discussing throughout the course. As you can see, there's 7 states there, all through the southwestern United States, all of which have to share this one critical river. So how is integrated water resources management supposed to work in a situation like that? Well, to start with, it's a large-scale example involving a lot of different organizations, state government organizations, federal governments, Indian tribes, local irrigation districts, and others. And the success of cooperative work at such a high level like this ultimately is going to involve some kind of agreements that are developed among the states and federal government agencies so that it works out with high-level actions which can be devolved down to the local level to work for actions on the ground. So in this case, the Colorado River Basin has got interstate compacts, Upper Basin Commission, Lower Basin Commission, and even agreements, international agreement between the United States and Mexico. There's a tremendous amount of effort that's put into using those management tools, including models, water laws, measurement of water, and all of those to make it work out. So for a large-scale example like this, integrated water resources management turns out to be the key tool, but it has to involve a lot of supporting tools, technical tools, institutional tools to make it work out. Here's another example, which again is at a fairly high level of scale, and I've focused on Brazil and what's been done there in recent years. And I'm showing a picture of Dr. Jerson Kelman, who's one of our graduates, who has directed an effort to organize river basin commissions and studies to address the problems of water across Brazil in multiple regions. Now, one of the things that they did in Brazil was to organize a national water agency called ANA, A-N-A, and Jerson was the first director of that agency. One of the focal points of the work of that agency was river basin commissions and studies, and one of those was in a basin that I'm showing here with the cursor. It's called the San Francisco Basin, River San Francisco, Brazil. It starts down in the industrialized region of Brazil down in here, and it goes to the northeast where it's drier and the people are lower in income with a lot of different types of water needs. And they've had a tremendous turmoil over sorting out how to use the water resources in the San Francisco River Basin. It involves tools and issues all the way from the river basin plans themselves to social actions and even protests, which have included a hunger strike by a prominent priest. And resolution of the issues in that river basin have reached all the way to the top levels of the country, including the president's office. So integrated water resources management is essential to deal with a problem of that scale, but in the end, to work things out is going to be very difficult and is going to go beyond simple technical tools that we might use. Now in Africa, you have different scales of problems. So one of those that we've worked with here at the university is how you can address water management at a local scale to benefit farmers and villages and get people to work together to resolve their own problems on the ground. Now, this is not going to take sophisticated national level organizations and large amounts of money infused. It's going to take development of local water resources, wells, diversions from local streams, irrigation systems, working together to resolve problems. So integrated water resources management here is going to deal more with people working together to solve their local problems than it will with those high-level, large-scale measures, such as in the Colorado River. In Asia, if we look there, you see tremendous problems due to population growth, large spatial scales. And I picked out one problem in particular, urban water management in Jakarta, Indonesia. The islands, the archipelago, is located down in this part of South Asia. There you see Jakarta, the capital of the country. And the case that I chose to discuss briefly is how you can develop urban water management in such a large megacity as that, where you have so many disenfranchised people, like this young fellow here who was trying to get water out of a pipe with an illegal tap. And the water pipe happens to be exposed in a waterway there so that you could see he has access to it. Some people are desperate, and that's the only way that they've got to get a water supply. And integrated water resources management in an urban setting like that would mean how to address water supply, wastewater, stormwater, and the needs of all kinds of populations of people all at the same time, meanwhile paying for it when the financial resources are not adequate for that in many cases. This was the subject of the dissertation, Robertus Trueco, that you see here on the left. He was one of our students. He worked on that in civil engineering, Colorado State University. And now he's become the president or rector of his university located in Indonesia. It's the Catholic University of Parayangan that you see listed on the left with that announcement of his appointment as the president. So integrated water resources management has high aspirations as a way that we can describe what's going on around the world and what the needs are to address these many issues. So you see a lot of praise for it. It focuses our shared quest for a solution to water resources problems and issues. It provides a principled and normative vision of water management, what it should be, and it explains many water management principles and solutions to situations which have to be confronted with solutions to deal with human and environmental problems. But integrated water resources management also is criticized a lot. There are many people who will say, well, it's visionary, but it's ambiguous and ineffective. It doesn't work. For example, that San Francisco River Basin in Brazil that I mentioned, people would blame the failure of some of the measures that were attempted on a poor integrated water resources management. Now, this is a very short-term, short-sighted view because the problems are simply too big to be solved through any one paradigm like that. Another criticism is that this is just an engineering and planning tool. It's oriented too much toward developing water resources projects, like new drinking water supply, for example. And in parallel with that, they would say that because it's an engineering and planning tool, it ignores societal needs and the real political nature of water. This kind of a criticism is not really aimed at integrated water resources management itself, so much as it's aimed at our continuing search for political paradigms and ways to organize society that work to address our needs in ways that people consider adequate for their needs, but also fair toward everyone. So what we're looking for is a way to improve integrated water resources management as we go down the road. On the bottom left, you see a book I wrote about this. It's called Total Water Management. And on the lower right, you see another one that I prepared. It's called Governance and Management for Sustainable Water Systems, where we're looking for ways to address these large-scale issues in a total way. But it's a real challenge. And if you look at the upper left, you see the cover of a report, World Water Vision. We have a lot of good reports like that address what we need to do, and we have a pretty good idea about the visionary approach. And the challenge is to make it work on the ground. Meanwhile, our group's working on that as we speak. You see Dr. Frank Reisperman. Frank is the Chief Executive Officer of a group called a Consortium for Agricultural Research Organizations around the world. He's there at the Africa Rice Center. Frank is one of our PhD graduates in civil engineering here at Colorado State. He did his dissertation on systems approach to managing water for food. He's been involved in a number of international efforts to address integrated water resources management, and is one of the authors of that book that you see on the upper left about what we should do. So once again, it's not a question so much of conceptualizing the big issues as it is figuring out how to make this work on the ground. So in the end, what it's going to take is integrated water resources management, which show us the best practices for different situations, and we're looking for balance through collective action of people to balance these many different purposes of water management. And that's where the challenge is. The real challenge is a people challenge. It's not a technological challenge. So integrated water resources management explains to us what we should do, and you can capitalize what we should do in those three words: integrate, connect, and act. But at the end of the day, the real challenge is to figure out how to make it work in the real world involving many different people issues.